Inshallah, we'll begin shortly. Testing. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. It's great to see you all here. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Kumail Jafar, and I'll be your host for this evening's event, a conversation in politics. This time last year, we were holding a debate on Brexit at this very centre, which was being broadcasted on Ahlul Bayt TV. In its wake, Theresa May has called a general election on the 8th of June. So the purpose of this dialogue is to encourage our youth and young adults to build their confidence in public speaking, as well as enhancing their skill in research and knowledge in power and politics, as well as to inform you of the policies of each political party relating to Brexit, education, healthcare, the NHS, foreign policies as opposed to domestic, and immigration. Before we go any further, can I please do a quick poll and ask you to raise your hands if you will be voting in this general election? Excellent, thank you. So let's see if the number of hands changes by the end of the program. Moving on to the agenda, we'll start by going through the ground rules, followed by a brief introduction to key information, and then a 5-minute speech by our well-researched panelists who will inshallah shed some light on the views of different political parties, followed by a question and answer session, and finishing with any burning points by our panelists. So in terms of ground rules, it is important to remember that the panelists have done research on these parties, but they are not necessarily speaking in favour or against any parties in their 5-minute speech. However, that party hat will come off once the question and answer begins. And so, if I can kindly ask us all to be respectful to each other and the panel by directing all questions to myself. Before we get onto the juicy part, let's have a look at a few statements and test our knowledge on what we know about the political parties today. So the first one, which political party wants to ban the burqa to boost women's vitamin D levels? Can anyone suggest? Ali Uncle? It is UKIP, that's correct, well done. Second one, which political party wants to bring about more competitive and affordable energy costs? I think I can hear someone saying the right answer. Go on. It's not Labour, it's Conservative for that one. This political party wants to raise corporation tax, the tax that companies pay. That one is Labour, that's correct. And which political party wants to raise £11 billion for the NHS? It isn't Green, it's UKIP, that one. Okay, so why is this election unique? This election is special. General elections in the UK were not a timed occurrence, but rather happened when there was a general consensus in Parliament that we should elect or re-elect a new government. The coalition government changed this in 2010. They changed the law saying that to limit a government's terms to 5 years. So why do we have a general election in the middle of a 5-year term? It is here for Theresa May and the Conservative Party to seek a mandate for the people for the negotiation of Brexit. A big question in this general election, therefore, is who do you trust to establish the best deal for Britain? Who stands for the same ideals as you? Which party wants an everlasting relationship with the EU, and which ones want a complete divorce? Moving on. The left and right political spectrum. Before we talk about what different parties' views are, it's important to establish what's the differences between left and right. So many people don't vote because they don't see the differences between political parties that exist within the UK. However, there are very significant differences, and by not voting, you may be allowing for a party that does not fit your beliefs and way of thinking to take power. What we intend to do is to shed a spotlight on this and to provide you with an insight on the fundamental and extremely important differences between the political parties to enable you to make an educated and informed decision. In order to do this, it is crucial to understand the differences between what many called left-wing parties and right-wing parties. The right has historically been associated with the interests of the wealthy upper or dominant classes, the left more expressive of the lower, poor classes, at the center of the middle classes. The right has defended several privileges and powers. The left has attacked them. The right has been more favorable to the wealthy class. The left has fought for the equalization or of opportunity with the claims of the less advantaged. So the people to your left will be, in a way, representing or have researched the parties that are more to the left, and the people to your right have researched the parties that are right-wing, supposedly. So the Labour Party has historically been associated to the left of the political spectrum, and the Conservative Party has been associated to the right of the spectrum. This is perhaps oversimplified, but it is one way, and probably the easiest way, of understanding the fundamental differences between the political parties. So let's move on to our panelists. So they are going to introduce themselves first. If I can start from Brother Aliasaria.
Brothers, my respected elders and scholars, Assalamu alaikum. My name is Ali Asaria, and I'm a third-year pharmacy student. So for me, politics isn't a career, but it's neither a hobby either. For me, politics is an obligation to make one's life better, both home and abroad, by exercising our democratic right in this country to vote. Today, I'll be presenting to you my research on the Green Party, and for you to make a decision when you go to vote.
Assalamu alaikum. I am Mohammed Haji. I'm a graduate of political science with experience of working for an NGO based in London. I now work in consulting for a healthcare consulting firm based in Scotland. I haven't got a as passionate speech as my brother here, but as an undergraduate, I've got a bit of knowledge, so I should be able to help you guys out. And I'll be discussing the Labour Party today. So,
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. My name is Zain Shah. I'm 18 years old. I'm not an expert on anything, but I take politics as one of my A-levels currently at college, and I'm planning on studying it as part of my degree next year. And I think politics is important for everyone to know, because it's important to know the system you live in and how important it is for you to also contribute to that society.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Mujtaba. I'm studying politics and economics here at the University of Leicester. My main area of interest is economics. I love to see how agents react and think, and how they will make choices, which is what the study of economics is all about. But economics is all theory, and no economic gains can be built without understanding political theory. So I'm studying the link between the two, and today I'll be reviewing the Conservative Party.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Azhar Jamil. I'm 15 years old and a year 11 secondary school student. So far I don't study politics or anything, but I still think it's really important for us to learn about political parties, so we can have a more significant say in our country's decisions. So today I'll be talking about the UKIP party.
Thank you very much. Before we continue, it's important for us to understand how elections work. So let's take a look at this short video which explains just that.
On this one day, every eligible person in the UK can place a vote and be part of electing their local representative to Parliament. Parties and candidates campaign to win votes by visiting constituents door to door, holding debates and publishing manifestos. A bit like a shopping list of what they plan to do if they're voted in. But how does the election work? The UK is divided into 650 constituencies, each of which is represented by one member of Parliament. Voters register for a polling card to make sure they can take part. On election day, polling stations are open from dawn till dusk. And if a voter can't make it along, there are other ways to make sure they can take part. Once every vote has been placed, the ballots are counted to find out which candidate has come out on top in each area. This is called first past the post. The elected MPs enter Parliament to sit in the House of Commons and represent everyone in their constituency. The political party with the most MPs, the majority, is invited by the Queen to form a government. And if there's a hung Parliament, where there's no clear winner, then a minority government or a coalition government may be created, or a fresh election held. So on this one day, a little piece of paper with your mark plays a big role in deciding who leads our country.
Now that we've understood how the elections work, it's important to realize that there is a widespread consensus amongst our learned and esteemed scholars that the active participation in politics is encouraged. Without further ado, let's policies. So let's begin with Labour.
Scholars, elders, brothers, sisters, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaykum salam.
For the purpose of providing you with enough information about my party, and I'd like to make a really informed decision, I'm going to make 3 main points. Number 1, for the first time in perhaps 2 decades, we've got an actual party that actually can be called left in reference to education, healthcare, and the economy. Number 2, I'm going to talk about the party's policy on the UK's departure of the EU, i.e. Brexit, and also foreign policy and immigration. And thirdly, why it's really important to have a strong opposition to any political party that wins, so any negotiations in reference to Brexit are going to be well accounted for and well opposed. So there's enough debate on the issue. So firstly, as a reminder, left-wing parties are more in favour of, as we were discussing, promoting things that bring about equality through the redistribution of wealth to those who are poor, disadvantaged, and those in need. It's about taxing those who are wealthier in favour of helping those who are less fortunate and less well off. So, with this in mind, look at the party today and the manifesto, it shows that for the first time in a very, very long time, the party fits that description of being left-wing. To make this point, let's look at a few of the plans addressed in the party's manifesto. On education and childcare, tuition fees at £9,000 a year currently will be scrapped, lowering the debt that students face after graduating. Plus, interest-free maintenance grants will be introduced to make the cost of living easier for students to handle. And also, a national education service will be established to provide cradle-to-grave learning, free at the point of use. Moreover, in what's been described as one of his signature manifesto pledges, the rollout of 30 free childcare hours to all 2-year-olds. On healthcare, the party commits to guaranteeing access to treatment within 18 weeks, people arriving at A&E to be seen within 4 hours, and a halt to pharmacy cuts to ensure all people have access to pharmacy services. the reintroduction of bursaries and funding for health-linked degrees, and guaranteeing rights for all EU staff working in the health and care sector. The party intends to tax the highest 5% of earners to raise £30 billion, which will be allocated to the NHS over the next 5 years. And on the economy, the party will be targeting the 1.2 million people who are earning over £80,000 a year, with a rise in income tax, raising £19.4 billion by raising corporation tax, i.e. the tax that companies pay, and also establishing new powers for HMRC to try and get those people who are dodging or evading tax. On Brexit and immigration, the party has committed to immediately guarantee existing rights of all EU nationals living in Britain and secure the rights for UK citizens living in another EU country, and maintain membership of organisations that benefit the UK and protect workers' rights. On foreign affairs, a commitment from the party to end support for unilateral wars and alleviate the refugee crisis, to not be afraid of disagreeing with the US, a commitment to a two-state solution in regards to the Palestine-Israel conflict, and the immediate recognition of Palestine as a country. Whatever your views, it's important to remember that a strong opposing party is required to ensure that areas, example Brexit, are given the highest amount of accountability, robust debate, and the required interrogation. In summary, the issues outlined in the party manifesto seem to fit the title it has been given, for the many, not the few. It marks a clear departure from the middle ground that the party used to be linked to, and a clear shift towards the left. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Conservative. Brother Mujtaba Kanji, if you can share your research with us.
My respected elders and brothers, Assalamu alaikum again. I will be reviewing the Conservative Party, who are also known as the Tory Party. So, when you're voting, or when you're thinking about voting in a couple of years, there are three areas to consider which are really important. Firstly, the ideology of the party. What does that party stand for? What can that party do for you? Secondly, how can the party policies make you or the people you care about better off? And thirdly, if elected, how competent is that party in delivering those policies? So quickly, a brief overview of the Conservative Party ideology, which has changed over history between the different leaders, but they're generally thought to be right-wing. What does this mean? In modern conservatism, there is a push for economic liberalization to gradually grow a free market economy. In addressing the social problems of the day, it is believed to be better dealt with by cooperation with private companies, charities and religious institutions rather than directly through government departments. So essentially, the government should encourage the effective provision of social services without providing the service itself. This is a very important question. This is what most politics is based on. What is the role of government? Should the government intervene in your life? Should it tax you? Should it let you grow your savings and your wealth? Having understood the party ideology, let us look at policy in the forthcoming election. The Conservative Party have prioritised a strong economy, which they hope to ensure by a sound public finance programme, by continuing to cut the deficit, which is the government's year-on-year spending. They have pledged to lower taxes by continuing the increase in personal tax allowance, which means those of you who work get to keep more of your earnings. The tax threshold for those who earn the highest will now apply to those earning over £50,000. So this is increasing the middle class. However, the previous promise to freeze VAT, to freeze national insurance, and to freeze income tax have now gone. They have also pledged to reduce corporation tax to 17%, which is one of the lowest of developed Western economies. They will establish a rise in the national living wage by 2020 to £8.75. Interestingly, a policy that both the Conservatives and the Labour Party want to implement is a National Productivity Investment Fund, the idea of a national bank, that the government helps private companies invest in infrastructure, in railways, in local transport, and in housing. In health, they have promised an increase in NHS spending by a minimum of $8 billion in real terms over the next 5 years. This extra funding is significant, but £8 billion is a relatively modest sum, and is doubtful that that is what the NHS needs. They have prioritised securing the citizenship of 140,000 EU nationals who work in the NHS, But this remains to be seen. Can Theresa May deliver everything she's promised in the Brexit negotiations? For those of you young people here still at school, there have been promises to boost school funding by £4 billion and free breakfast for all primary school children, and the establishment of new, better grammar schools. However, they have not addressed class size increases and the fact that spending per pupil is actually decreasing. Just quickly, a few other important policies include defeating extremism, closing the pay gap between corporate executives and the broader workforce by legislating pay packages, which are subject to strict annual votes by shareholders. So I'll summarize. The big bonuses will now be restricted. You will now earn similar or to a closer bracket to your manager, to your seniors. They will also restructure public services to correct all forms of prejudicial treatment, including the hiring and pay of minority ethnic groups. So it's come to light that in public programs and civil servants, minority ethnic groups aren't being paid the same or treated the same or given the right amount of holidays, etc. And lastly, when we're talking about competence, to assess the ability to the Conservative Party's ability to deliver on election promises, we need to look at their record in government. Have they been successful? Well, in 2010, they promised to cut the deficit. They've done this relatively well. However, in this time, they've been the biggest borrowers in British history and have tripled the national debt to almost £2 trillion. At a time when the government needs more tax revenue, they've been cutting taxes. They've been cutting income taxes and corporation taxes. Instead, where did they find the money? Well, they cut programs. They cut government programs, public sector programs and policy. This is known as austerity. So, Theresa May insists on a strong and stable government, a strong economy. However, some banks are under government control. Employment has risen, but working hours haven't. Firms and consumers have been reluctant to start spending again. Wages are behind inflation. Business tax cuts have not led to a rise in investment, and they have not been able to foster an environment of strong growth and pure economic recovery. I will welcome any questions and give any clarification in the question and answer segment of this program.
Right. Thank you very much, Brother Mujtaba. Let's see what the Lib Dems have to say by Brother Zain Shah.
Respected elders and brothers, Assalamu alaikum again. So I forgot to mention before, but I will be representing the Liberal Democrats and will inform you of my research. So I'm going to go into straight away the main policy areas that Liberal Democrats stand for, starting with the biggest topic area of this debate being Brexit. So in terms of the European Union and Brexit, Liberal Democrats strongly believe in protecting Britain's place in Europe. They passionately believe that Britain is better off in the EU. They want to fight against the Conservatives' decision of Brexit and believe that it is down to the electorate to decide the final decision. They know that the 2016 referendum gave the government the mandate, which means the right to start negotiations for Brexit, but they now feel that the final push and the final decision should be made in another referendum. So in terms of the European Union, they want to keep the UK in the single market and customs union. They believe that trade must continue without damaging custom controls on the border, which basically means of free movement of goods and services between countries inside the European Union without there being added costs. Because if we were to actually leave the EU, some deals with countries could take up to years to build again, which could harm our international competitiveness. They also want to protect the rights of EU and UK citizens living abroad. There might be some people who retire from this country and decide to move to Spain or a country like that that's in the EU, and they can do that freely. But without us being in the European Union, their rights as British national could be damaged. Moving on to health and social care, the Liberal Democrats strongly believe in saving our NHS and the care services. The NHS and social care services are in a state of crisis. The Conservative government have left them chronically underfunded and staff embattled and undervalued. while need continues to grow and patient care suffers. Because of the NHS cuts that the Conservatives have put in place, occupations such as nurses have been left going to food banks because they are not being paid enough for a crucial role that they do play in our lives. So in terms of the NHS, Liberal Democrats want, because of the Conservative cuts, 1.2 million elderly people are not getting the care and support they need. Now these elderly people could be some of our family members. Also, 15% of operations are being cancelled. And waiting times in A&E are increasing, with many people waiting up to 4 hours to get the help they need. The Lib Dems want to introduce an extra penny in every pound of income tax in order to fund a £6 billion NHS cash injection into the NHS, which could be in the form of investment and subsidies. They want to invest in public health, social care, primary care, and mental health. They also want to limit the amount elderly people have to pay for social care. Now, one of the main agendas in the Liberal Democrat Manifesto is their emphasis on education. They strongly believe in putting children first. Education is at the heart of the Liberal Democrat agenda. They believe every child deserves the best start in life, but because of the Conservative school cuts currently, it means that children's chances are determined too often by their parents' income. Liberal Democrats want to invest 7.5 billion extra in children's education so no school loses money per pupil in cash terms, as schools currently are resorting to asking parents for donations, which should never have been the case in the first place. They also want to triple the early years premium to £1,000 to help give disadvantaged children the best start. And they want to also oppose the Conservative new idea of introducing grammar schools in order to resist against segregation and believe that everyone have equal chance, and to give local authorities proper control over admissions and new schools. Moving on to the international affairs, they want to fight for a better world. Liberal Democrats are internationalists and want to work with European and global partners to champion human rights, help the poorest, and protect our country and our allies. They will fight isolationist policies to maintain the UK's proud record of being an international leader. Liberal Democrats will aim to continue to spend 0.7% of national income on aid, reducing poverty, defending human rights, and protecting the environment and preventing violent conflict. They will aim to defend international cooperation against the rising tides of nationalism and isolationism, and also want to suspend arms sales to Saudi Arabia and control arms exports to countries with poor human rights. I hope that was a good insight on the Liberal Democrat Party. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go over to UKIP.
Assalamu alaikum. I am here today to present some of my research on UKIP. So, the UK Independence Party, led by Paul Nuttall, is a Eurosceptic right-wing populist party. So Eurosceptic basically means that they're not in favor of the European Union. And as we may already know, that Brexit has always had a very significant role in their manifesto. So regarding this, they have pledges to make June the 23rd Independence Day and be made a bank holiday. Also, they want to refuse to pay the Brexit divorce bill and to restore the blue British passport. Quite an emphasis to their Eurosceptic views is their pledge to ban all EU flags from being flown from all public buildings. Now, Brexit seems to have quite a lot to do with immigration. UKIP wants to introduce a one-in, one-out immigration system and place a moratorium for all unskilled and low-skilled workers. A moratorium is basically a temporary prohibition. And after we leave the EU, they want to deny amnesty for all illegal immigrants, and they want to introduce a social attitudes test as part of a point-based system. So a point-based system would basically just allow people to enter the United Kingdom if they have useful skills. Okay, now let's go on to foreign policies. For their foreign policies, they want to withdraw from the Paris Climate Change Agreement and want to scrub the commitment of spending 0.7% of our GDP on foreign aid. They want to reduce this to 0.2%. That would be a £9 billion cut. For Trident, they want to keep it, so that's basically nuclear weapons, and they want to commission a naval ocean-going surgical hospital, or a NOS ship, to ensure Britain can help in times of global crisis. Moving on to the NHS and healthcare, UKIP wants to invest an extra £11 billion every year in the NHS and social care. They also have pledges to raise the cap on medical school training places from 7,500 to 10,000 places. In terms of security, they want to spend 2% of our GDP on defense, plus £1 billion extra for the defense budget. They want to fund 20,000 more police officers, 7,000 more prison officers, and 4,000 more border force staff. They would keep all existing prisons open and keep all existing building plans for prisons. Also, they want to send as many as possible of the 13,000 foreign nationals in UK jails back to their home countries to serve their sentences. For education, UKIP wants to scrap tuition fees for science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and medicine students, as well as opening a grammar school in every town. Now, for Muslims specifically, they want to ban the apparently dehumanizing burqa and full face veils for all public places. Now, the reasonings behind this is, firstly, integration, secondly, surveillance, and according to their manifesto, it prevents essential vitamin D intake from sunlight. Finally, they want to place a moratorium or a temporary ban on new Islamic faith schools, and again, according to their manifesto, they want to ban the practice of Sharia law in UK. Thank you.
Wow, okay. Let's see what the Green Party have to say with Brother Ali Asaria.
Brothers, Assalamu alaikum. So many of you will have heard of the parties that have just gone before you came here today, but some of you may not know necessarily of the Green Party. I'm going to give you a bit of insight of the history of the Green Party and then the actual policies in this election. So the Green Party was originally, has its roots in 1972, known as the People's Party. It was founded by Leslie Whitaker. It then moved on to become known as the Ecology Party because of its favorite policy towards environmental protection as opposed to the other parties. It fielded approximately 53 candidates in the 1979 election, and in this last election, in 2015, it got 1 million votes and 1 seat in Parliament. And therefore, despite it being a small party in terms of politics, it's actually one on the rise. So I'm going to outline some of the policies in regards to 5 different points: Brexit, healthcare, education, domestic policy, foreign policy, and immigration. So in terms of Brexit, when you went to vote last June, on June the 23rd, you had a slip that said either leave or remain. You had no choice in whether, when we leave, what would be the terms and conditions of the deal. So what the Green Party wants to do is actually allow you to have a referendum again, as opposed to the other parties. So when we go into the deal with the EU, we'll have a number. The Green Party will fight for a number of rights. So the first right would be the rights of the EU citizens to remain in the UK, the rights of British citizens to remain in the EU, preserve all the environmental laws and the human rights protection laws that are over us that come from the EU, protect freedom of movement. So right now you are free to go to France, to Spain, wherever you want to go within the EU and travel as and when you like. They want to protect this even if we leave the EU. So they'll fight for all this, and including remaining in the single market as part of the deal. And then they'll bring this deal back to us and the public for us to vote on whether we still want to remain or whether we want to leave. So that's one key difference in terms of Brexit as opposed to the other parties. In terms of education, so they want to scrap tuition fees. So right now, students have to pay £9,000 a year and come out of university with a lot of debt. So they want to try and scrap this so that students come out debt-free, and it provides an initiative for students to go into university. They want to abolish SATs and reduce class sizes. They want to bring academies and free schools into the local authority system. And in the words of Caroline Lucas, who is actually the Green Party co-leader, is that education should be a public good and not a private commodity. They want to ensure that students have full grants and maintenance grants so that they can live within their means as well as going into university without being cash-stricken. They want to ensure early education for all children and address the crisis of the teacher workload by abolishing Ofsted. So by abolishing Ofsted, what they mean is that they will actually ensure that teachers are free to go about their curriculum in a pupil-centered manner without the pressure from an external body. They also want to ensure that all children with special education needs or a disability have the exact same rights as normal children in education. So in terms of healthcare and the NHS, well, as a traditional left party, they want to roll back the privatization of the NHS. They want to bring mental health awareness into the public domain so that we all have an equal understanding of mental health as well as physical health. They want to open up this dialogue in our society. They want to ensure a major investment in social care for the elderly and provide an immediate cash injection into the NHS. So in regards to a few more domestic policies, so they want to bring energy, water, railway, buses, and the Royal Mail into public ownership, which has been lost over the last 30 years. They want to increase funding for local authorities, creating thousands of jobs and invest locally in our community. And they want to increase houses by about 100,000 by 2022. So they also want to address the pension injustice as per se, but they've actually not outlined how they're going to do that in the manifesto. So that's up for your interpretation. They also want to outline the benefits injustice, but they've not addressed that in their manifesto, so that's down for your interpretation. In regards to immigration and foreign policy, well, at the moment, if you're a British resident and you want to bring over someone from a foreign country to come and live here, you have to provide, it takes a long time, and you have to provide extensive proof of their relationship to you as a British national. The Green Party wants to scrap this and make it a lot easier. Another policy is that we have illegal migrants in this country who have been living in this country for 5 years. Now, the Green Party's view is that if they've been living in this country for 5 years and they don't pose a threat to us as a society, they should be able to remain in the UK. Also, when immigration, in terms of immigration, when it's applied for, they often ask for financial status of the person to sponsor them and whether they can, and accommodation. But the Green Party want to scrap this so that immigration will not be dependent on a person's financial status or whether they have accommodation or not. Now, in terms of foreign policy, they want to ensure an ethical foreign policy. They opposed the Iraq war. They opposed the Libyan intervention as a whole. They want to acknowledge Britain's role in the refugee crisis and help in the refugee crisis. They want to stop arms sales to those who are abusive in human rights. So therefore, the war in Yemen carried out by Saudi Arabia, the weapons to Saudi Arabia will be stopped. They also want to abolish Trident. And this is a key difference between Labour and the Green Party. So everything I've just said right now, you may think that it's very similar to Labour, as you've heard. But Jeremy Corbyn believes in scrapping Trident, but the party itself has in its manifesto voted to keep Trident. Now, Trident is nuclear weapons. So the Green Party believes that it should be scrapped because from an environmental point of view, it's a disaster, and also it'll kill millions of people. So that itself will generate an income of 100 billion over the next 30 years. And eventually, the Green Party wants to withdraw the UK from NATO And this would mean that we wouldn't be going into potentially unnecessary conflicts with Russia.
Thank you. Very interesting. Thank you to you all very much for what I'm sure we would all agree to be enlightening and educational. The researchers will now take their party hats off, and I'd like to open it to the floor for the question and answer session. So just raise your hand and we can begin. Sajjad Momin. Thank you. So why should I vote Labour when they propose to reduce tuition fees? Tuition fees, is higher education a right or a privilege?
I think higher education is a right, not a privilege. I think studies and various papers have been written to show that students who are worrying less about money and worrying more about their education are more likely to be successful. I think secondly, there's an element of as an economy, we're more likely to be better off as an economy if we've got a more educated workforce, a more motivated and more well-driven workforce. I think thirdly also, this particular party, the Labour Party, is the only one to say that from cradle to grave, that's the exact phrase, from cradle to grave, free education. That's obviously a great thing because as a student, if you're enticed to go into higher education and not worry about debt and future money problems, you're more likely to be more educated, more successful, and more better able to contribute towards the wider economy.
Thank you.
Okay, I disagree with you. Okay, so you're saying that a person going to university has less to worry about. If he's not going to worry about money, he can focus on his education. Let me ask you, you sat here today, when you know you've got an exam and you know the pressure at home, you need to get things done, you need to get your work done, your homework done, you know you're going to be in trouble if you don't do it. Okay, when there's a high price tag on your education, don't you think you're going to work harder? Yes? No? Will you work harder when you know you're going to pay £9,000 a year? I'll tell you, I'm paying £9,000 a year. I can't afford to mess around. I have to get up and run to uni because I'm paying £90 for one lecture. That's one thing. Secondly, in the strength of the economy, if education is everyone's right and you get to choose whatever you want to study, there are so many weird and wacky subjects out there. There's a new degree in memes. You used to know what memes are, right? There's a degree you can do for 3 years at university. Forget science, doctor, medicine, engineer, lawyer, whatever. Memes, studying communication and memes. Is that really what we want our youth to be doing? What our economy needs right now? So, I don't know if anyone from the floor wants to contribute, but should education be free? And on that, we did talk about grammar schools. It's the same thing. So, if your parents, mashallah, have worked well and they've been able to finance a grammar school, a really nice private school for you, so then you can have a good education. Shouldn't that be your right? Or should it not be like that everyone should go to the same standard of school? Should clever kids get special treatment? I pose that to the floor as well.
I think to make the assumption that by having tuition fees, you're going to reduce the likelihood of having weird and wacky courses. Ironically speaking, the highest country to charge tuition fees is the US. And ironically speaking, who wants to guess where this memes degree came from? The US. So therefore, I think it's a false assumption to make that if we suddenly start charging people money, we're going to have the best degrees in the world. I think secondly, I think we have to, economists all across the UK, those working in the World Bank, the IMF, all agree that those countries, in regards to China, South Korea, Singapore, Malaysia, the top performing countries in the world in terms of IQ tests and education levels, are those countries that actually have very, very low, if not no tuition fees at all. Hence making the point that if you are not worrying about money and debt problems, it's because you're able to focus more on education. I think also on the point that by charging you money, you're going to be more likely to work harder. Again, personally, I was more motivated to get a job and not become unemployed and be on the dole. That was my motivation, not because I'm paying $9 a year. That's just my own personal take.
Very interesting, thank you. Any other questions from the floor? Yes, brother.
So in terms of the Liberal Democrats, they believe that the referendum that just went by for the EU, that gave the current government the right to start negotiating the deal. But if the Liberal Democrats were to come into governing the country, they will hold another referendum on the final decision of whether the country should leave or stay in the EU, no matter even if the negotiations are made or not. Yeah.
Okay, so this is an interesting one. Can Article 50 be revised? Yes, and sort of no as well. It goes to the Supreme Court and it goes to the European Court and they debate it. I think to add some clarification on what the Greens and proposing a second referendum. If you guys remember from last year's referendum, the question was, should the UK leave the European Union? As Ali Bar said, that they didn't give any clarification as to when, how, what sort of deal we were getting. Is it a soft Brexit? Is it a hard Brexit? What do those terms mean? Are we going to have a nice, open relationship with the EU when we've left? Or is it going to be a nasty, bitter divorce and, you know what, Marcus, I don't want to see you again? So we don't know those things. What they're proposing, what these parties are proposing, is a referendum on the final terms of the deal. But even if that goes to a no, it's very unlikely that you could go back to the European institutions and be like, okay, can you give us again another chance? I mean, what have they got to gain by dealing with the UK? So one important thing I was going to come to later anyway is that in this vote, you have to bear in mind that this vote is about Brexit. And who do you trust to deliver Brexit in 2 years? 2 years in political terms is a very short period of time. And if we don't find a deal in 2 years' time, we leave completely, just complete sort of severance package done. And we go to high tariff barriers to trade with the rest of the world. We go through World Trade Organization rules. We see no benefits with the EU. We have to negotiate trade deals from the start, and that could put us in a very dire economic situation. So it's about who can deliver the strongest Brexit deal in the quickest amount of time.
Can I just add to that? So, I don't know about you, but me, myself, I'm guilty of it. But when we sign up to something, we don't really read the terms and conditions. We just scroll down and press agree, right? So what the Green Party and the Lib Dems are both suggesting is actually reading those terms and conditions first and then going about it. So right now, what the Lib Dems and the Green Party both accept the results of the referendum last June, but ultimately, it should be back in the public's hands to decide whether we remain or not, rather than MPs in Parliament. So, yeah.
Thank you. We have almost reached our end time. I'm conscious that you do want Praise Salah as well as have your food. So really quickly, is there a question from the floor? Mohammed Jafri. Is Jeremy Corbyn threatening the Britain's security by removing Trident?
Okay, so at this moment in time, there are only a few countries in the world that actually have nuclear weapons. So amongst them are UK, us, the US, France, Russia, China, North Korea, India, Pakistan, and Israel's in a state of ambiguity, but most say that they do have nuclear weapons. So from those countries, there are probably only Russia and North Korea that pose a serious threat to our country. But through diplomacy, you can alleviate that threat. So by working with China, you can actually stop North Korea from developing any more and actually getting rid of their nuclear weapons. So instead of going about Trump's aggressive foreign policy, which is likely to increase the chance of war with North Korea, actually going about diplomacy first is the best solution rather than just killing millions of people.
Okay, so for those of you who can't vote, I hope you bear this in mind when you can vote. For those of you who can, I hope you do go and vote. It is worth voting. People have died to get you to this situation where you can vote and make a difference. Every vote counts. If you feel that none of the parties give you a choice, then go and vote. Just spoil your ballot. Draw whatever you want on a piece of paper, but at least go there, make the effort and vote. Because if you do that and there are enough spoiled ballots, then there's a process to look into where are the options. Why did people not vote? Why did people not find a party that they could reconcile with? That's number one. Number two, policies matter, but not so much. Because what a government can and can't do is based on what they believe in. So pick a party that believes in the same things that you do. Big governance versus small governance. High taxes versus low taxes. Strong growth or not. But yeah, those are my 2 cents. Thank you very much.
Okay, so today our world is full of injustices. We see the terrorism in Manchester to this famine in Somalia. Each of this is affected by one thing, and that's politics. And if you come out on June the 8th and you vote, you can make a real difference, not only to our lives in the UK, but the lives of people abroad, in Iraq, in Syria, in Palestine, and wherever. So if you vote today, you can shape our future tomorrow. That's my message.
Just a quick quote by Edmund Burke. He said, "Nobody ever made a greater mistake than he who did nothing because he thought he could only do a little." It's so, so important this time round in this election that despite what you may think, you know, a tick in a box might not do much for you, it actually can. You'll be very surprised how powerful your vote can be in actually making sure that we get justice in this world. So just bear that in mind.
Okay, thank you very much to our panelists for all the great research that they've done. And thank you very much for joining us today. We pray that this has been beneficial to you and given you, most importantly, the reasons why you should vote and also the key information for who to vote for. Can we please close with a loud salawat? Allahumma